The wrong flight. The fluorescent lights of Gate 27 buzzed softly overhead as Sarah Chen adjusted her sleeping son's position in her lap. 5-year-old Tommy had been awake since 4 in the morning, excited about their first airplane ride together. Now finally, he dozed peacefully against her shoulder, his small fingers clutching his worn dinosaur toy. Sarah glanced at her boarding pass one more time, double-checking the gate number. Everything seemed correct. Flight 342 to Phoenix, where her sister lived and where a new job at a small accounting firm waited for her. It wasn't glamorous work, but it would be enough to give Tommy a stable life after months of struggling to make ends meet in Seattle. The boarding announcement crackled through the speakers, and Sarah gently woke Tommy. "Come on, sweetheart. Time to get on the plane." They shuffled forward with the other passengers, Tommy's eyes wide as he took in everything around him. Sarah found their row and settled into the window seat, helping Tommy with his seatbelt. The plane was much nicer than she had expected, with wider seats and more legroom than she remembered from the budget flights she'd taken years ago as other passengers filed past. Sarah noticed something odd. Everyone seemed to be dressed more formally than she would have expected for a domestic flight. Business suits, expensive watches, designer luggage. She looked down at her simple jeans and cardigan, feeling suddenly out of place. A tall man in an impeccably tailored navy suit approached their row. He had dark hair, kind eyes, and the sort of confident bearing that suggested success. Sarah's heart sank as she realized he was probably assigned to the seat next to theirs. "Excuse me," he said politely, his voice warm despite the formal setting. "I believe I'm in for B." Sarah checked her boarding pass again, confused. She was in for a, Tommy, in for C, but this was supposed to be an economy flight. These seats felt more like first class. "I'm sorry," she said, gathering Tommy closer. "I think there might be some mistake. We're supposed to be on flight 342 to Phoenix." The man paused, glancing at his own ticket. A flight attendant approached. Having overheard the conversation, she was impeccably dressed, with the kind of polished appearance Sarah associated with international flights. "Let me check your boarding passes," the flight attendant said with a professional smile. Sarah handed over their tickets, her stomach beginning to knot with anxiety. The flight attendant studied them carefully, then looked at her tablet. "Mrs. Chen, I'm afraid there's been a mix-up. This is flight 324 to New York, not Phoenix. Your original flight was delayed and then cancelled due to mechanical issues. The airline automatically rebooked you on this flight, but there seems to have been an error with the destination." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. New York. She couldn't afford New York. She didn't know anyone in New York, and she certainly couldn't afford to buy new tickets to Phoenix. "I don't understand," she said, trying to keep her voice steady for Tommy's sake. "I can't go to New York. We need to get to Phoenix. My sister's expecting us, and I have a job starting Monday." The flight attendant's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm so sorry. Let me see what options we have." The man in the navy suit had been listening quietly. Now he spoke up. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Sarah looked at him, surprised by the genuine concern in his voice. "That's very kind, but I don't think so. This is just ... This is a disaster." Tommy stirred in her arms, sensing her distress. "Mommy, are we still going to Aunt Lisa's house?" "I don't know, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, fighting back tears. The flight attendant returned after several minutes of hushed phone conversations. "Mrs. Chen, I have some options for you. The next available flight to Phoenix isn't until Thursday, and it would require 2 connections." Or she paused. "This flight continues on to Phoenix after a brief layover in New York. You could stay on board, and we could arrange for the airline to cover your accommodation in New York tonight." Sarah calculated quickly in her head. She had exactly $3 in her wallet and maybe 50 in her checking account. A hotel in New York, even if the airline contributed, would likely be beyond her means. "The layover option sounds best," she said quietly. "Actually," the man beside her interjected, "if you don't mind me asking, what kind of work do you do?" Sarah hesitated. There was something about his manner that suggested he wasn't just making conversation. "I'm an accountant, or I will be, starting Monday in Phoenix." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'm Michael Chen, by the way. No relation, I assume, despite the name." He smiled, and Sarah noticed how it transformed his entire face, making him seem younger and less intimidating. "Sarah Chen," she replied, "and this is Tommy." Tommy peeked up shyly from behind his dinosaur. "Are you rich?" he asked, with the blunt curiosity of a 5-year-old. Michael laughed, a genuine sound that filled the space around them. "I suppose I am." "Tommy, why do you ask? Your suit looks expensive, and you smell nice like my daddy used to." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Tommy, that's not polite to ask," but Michael seemed unfazed. "It's a fair question." "Yes, Tommy, I've been very fortunate in business, but you know what? Being rich doesn't mean much if you don't have people to share it with." As the plane took off, Michael began talking with Tommy about dinosaurs, asking thoughtful questions about his toy, and listening intently to Tommy's elaborate stories. Sarah found herself relaxing despite her circumstances. There was something gentle about this man, something that contradicted his corporate appearance. "Can I ask you something?" Michael said to Sarah during a quiet moment while Tommy dozed again. What brought you to this point? Moving across the country with your son. Sarah found herself telling him everything. The divorce 2 years ago, her ex-husband's disappearance and failure to pay child support, the mounting bills, the job loss 3 months ago, the sister in Phoenix who had offered them a fresh start. Michael listened without judgment, occasionally asking gentle questions. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, he said finally, I want to make you an offer, and I want you to really consider it before you say no. She tensed, suddenly wary. I run a company in New York, he continued. We're actually looking for a senior accountant. The position pays significantly more than what you'd make in Phoenix, and we provide housing assistance for new employees. Would you consider interviewing for it? Sarah stared at him. I don't understand. You don't even know me. I know you're a mother who's doing everything she can to provide for her son. I know you're honest enough to admit when you're struggling, instead of pretending everything is fine. And I know Tommy thinks the world of you, which tells me more about your character than any resume could. But why would you help us? Michael was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the clouds below. Because 3 years ago I lost my wife and daughter in a car accident. I threw myself into work afterward, and now I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, but I eat dinner alone every night in a house that's too big and too quiet. He turned back to her, and Sarah saw the depth of pain in his eyes. Maybe, he said softly, we can help each other. As the plane descended toward New York, Sarah held Tommy close and thought about second chances. Sometimes the wrong flight could take you exactly where you needed to be 6 months later. Sarah would look back on that moment as the beginning of not just a new job but a new family. Tommy would have a father figure who taught him about business and baseball with equal enthusiasm, and Michael would discover that the sound of a child's laughter in his home was worth more than all his success combined. But for now, as the wheels touched down in New York, Sarah simply squeezed Tommy's hand and whispered, "Ready for an adventure, sweetheart?" Tommy nodded sleepily, still clutching his dinosaur. "Is Mr. Michael coming with us?" Sarah looked at the kind man beside them who was already making calls to arrange their accommodation and her interview. "Yes," she said, smiling for the first time in months. "I think he is."